kind of tough for me because I just spoke a few weeks ago and I was kind of just concentrating on that. And I was like, the retreat came. Frank was like, oh, it's here. And I'm like, I don't got nothing. So I wasn't sure if I was going to be up here. There was times like throughout the week where I was just going to tell him I wasn't going to speak, or I wasn't going to say anything, or it was just going to be like a 2-minute thing or something like that. We had Zoom meetings. We helped each other out, topics, stuff like that. And this is what came to me. Here we go. So I'm sure everyone here has been seeing what's been going on with Palestine and Israel. I'm sure everyone knows here what's been going on with Russia and Ukraine. These are wars. And putting your own views aside from them for a second, these are wars that their nation's leaders have put strategic planning into. These are not things that were just random. Their militaries put in planning and preparing to fight for their nations against enemy forces. They have the proper weapons and proper armor for battle. But when it comes to war as Christians, the war that we're all involved in, the spiritual warfare that we're all involved in, sometimes we do almost no planning or preparing for what the enemy has against us. A lot of us don't even know that we're currently at war. And so it becomes almost easy to be defeated. But it doesn't have to be that way. The Bible shows us directly what kind of war we are in and what God has given us to properly fight in this war and what kind of enemy that we're facing. In Ephesians, we see Paul explain the enemy we are wrestling against as wicked forces. Wicked forces like anxiety, depression, defeat, discouragement, temptation, fear, lies, revenge, rejection, loneliness, having thoughts of returning to your old self. The list goes on and on. But Ephesians 6:12, it says in one version, finally, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. But I wondered what Paul means when he uses the word wrestle. In other versions of the Bible, it says instead the word struggle. Okay, that's my intro. Hey! My next question, I'm going to ask everyone. No one can answer the question. Jesse can't answer the question. Gio can't answer the question. And both of you can't answer the question. Does anyone here know my favorite thing to watch?
Wrestling.
There you go. I should have included Sammy too.
Included Sammy. Nice, Sammy. Warriors.
Now,
New Jersey Housewives.
I wanna set up the time that Paul was writing this in Ephesians. Now, when you are preparing for a wrestling match, what's a basic thing that you need to know first? Anybody? What's up?
How to grab?
Close. More simpler than that.
DJ's a professional. Your opponent?
Opponent. That's good. That's good. Simpler.
Yourself.
Almost. I'm just going to say you first need to just know the rules. Right?
Nice.
So when I think of actual pro wrestling, I think first of Olympic wrestling, where two people spend time trying to pin one another to the mat or trying to get you to submit in a hold. So while this is happening, is there really a lot of standing going on? So when Paul says wrestle against and stand against the devil's schemes, how are you supposed to stand upright and wrestle at the same time?
This guy.
How can we make sense of this? Ephesians says over and over to stand, but also says that we are wrestling. So the time that Paul was writing this in, it was maybe 2,000 years ago. So I was looking that this was during the Roman Empire, right? Owen, fact check. He's the history guy. So the wrestling that he was speaking about, I'm assuming was the Greco-Roman style of wrestling. So what I did was I looked up the rules for wrestling in his day. And in Paul's day, there was only one rule to win in Roman wrestling. The only way to win was to stay on your feet. There weren't rules like pinning or submitting your opponent. The goal was to stay on your feet and to throw your opponent to the ground 3 times. So if you end up getting thrown to the ground once or twice, that's okay. You get back up on your feet, you stay on your feet, you stay standing up, you don't get knocked down again, you learn from your mistakes, and you attempt to throw your opponent to the ground. In Roman wrestling, every single hold, just like the devil's holds against us, were legal. It only ended when one person gave up. So when we understand this, what Paul is talking about makes way more sense now. We ought to stand our ground in this battle, and the only way to win is to stay on your feet. Now, I want to get the picture of a wrestler in your head. What do they wear? Good. Good. What else? Any underwear? That's good. That's what I'm looking for. Tights. Not a lot of clothing, right? Not a lot of clothing. And what's another thing when a wrestler is entering, even in the WWE, when they're entering the arena, what do they have all over their body?
Oil. The belt.
You got it. You said oil?
I said oil.
Oil? Okay.
Olive oil.
They're right. They're all oiled up, right? Right? Don't see them shining when they're walking down? You think that's just
Natural shine.
It's baby oil.
the reason for the little clothing and the oil was to make it difficult for their opponent to grab onto them. In Ephesians 4:27 it says, "And do not give the devil a foothold." To not give the devil a handle in our lives. To get rid of everything that causes us to sin and what gets us stuck to the mat. And the oil, as soon as I thought of that, I knew somewhere that the Bible talked about oil. Psalm 45:7 says that it's the oil that keeps us from the devil's grasp. The love we have for God and his ways. For you love God and seek him to serve him only. This will help you in staying on your feet. So we need to be oiled up with God for this wrestling match. We need to be oiled with his strength, oiled with prayer, oiled with worship.
Come on. Yes.
So, keeping with this, a wrestler, they must develop great strength or stamina. For pro wrestlers, training begins at a young age. Sometimes the best wrestlers can struggle against one another for hours without a winner. So I Googled the Olympics for the longest wrestling match that ever lasted. Anyone have any ideas how many hours it lasted?
60.
2.
10 hours and 15 minutes. Everyone's surprised by that, right? Imagine wrestling for that long. But you know what? The spiritual war we fight can also last that long. The spiritual war we go through is not the WWE. It's not fake. It's not scripted. It's more like UFC. Maybe worse than Ultimate Fighting. Paul is calling us in Ephesians to the wrestling match of his times, to stay on our feet and not to get thrown to the mat, to stand our ground and wrestle as long as necessary. So are you ready to go to war? Are you doing your planning and preparing? Have you learned the wrestling moves to stand against the enemy that is trying to knock you down? Do you have the strength and stamina to stay standing? Have you thrown off all the sin that the devil tries to hold our grasp with? Have you oiled up your bodies with the love of God? This is what wrestling was in Paul's day, and so it helps us understand our spiritual wrestling match as well.
Amen.
But the good thing is, nobody here even has to know how to wrestle.
Amen. Come on.
It's all okay because you don't need to win the match. The war, it was already won when Jesus died on the cross.
Amen. That's it. That's it.
And all we need to do now is stand on our feet. The enemy has no wrestling hold on us as we are always free through Jesus.
Wow. Come on, amen. That's it. There it is.
By faith, we have victory that overcomes the devil and his schemes. Amen.